Great folks here. I think it's the great folks here. I think it's the perfect mix of skill and experience across their long careers in support and the things they have done in the Indo-Pacific realm as well. So I'm going to start with introductions and then we'll do some welcoming remarks. To my right is Lieutenant General Jared Helwig. He is the Deputy Commander of the U.S. Transportation Command, or TRANSCOM. They have a global responsibility to project and sustain all power, military power around the world, and a very critical mission here in the Indo-Pacific realm. General Helwig, before this, hey, sir. Before his promotion to 3-star, he actually commanded the 8th Theater Sustainment Command, and had also was the J4, excuse me, Director of Logistics and Engineering at Indo-PACOM. I think Admiral Paparo has left by now, but so anyway, thank you, Jared, for agreeing to attend. And his replacement at the 8th Theater Sustainment Command is Major General Gavin Gardner, another old friend of mine, but and looking forward to hear what General Gardner has to say here. The 8th TSC provides mission command for Army Joint and Combined Sustainment within the Indo-Pacific realm of operations. Kind of a pretty large mission, but sir, glad to have you on the team here. He also served as the J4 at Indo-PACOM and was Director of Logistics and Engineering before he got into this role. So thank you, sir, for being here. To his right is Major General Denise McPhail. She is the commander of the U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command. Got it right. NETCOM. NETCOM, with over 14,000 personnel, has a global responsibility to provide the U.S. Army with a unified and secure network within the U.S. Department of Defense Information Network, or DODIN, as we like to call it. But among other key assignments, General McPhail spent several years here as the Indo-PACOM J6. 2 years as the deputy and then 2 years as the actual J6. So thank you, General McPhail, for being here. And finally, on the far end, Ms. Tara Murphy-Doherty. She is Chief Executive Officer of the company Govini. Govini, and you probably saw a handout on your chair, and I was discussing with Tara before the session, the supply chain. When you think supply chain, often folks just think about products that are already ready for consumption, just getting it to the consumer. Well, supply chain really goes all the way back to the rare earth elements or whatever raw materials you need to create the product that the consumer desires. So that was, I think, a great handout, very relevant to our conversation today. But Govini is a defense software company that builds software to accelerate defense acquisition and logistics processes that field capabilities to warfighters faster. Under her leadership, Govini has experienced huge growth, including a recent contract award from DoD, the U.S. Department of Defense, for over $900 million. So congratulations on that achievement. And I'm sure we'll hear about what she's doing and what Govini is doing for the Department of Defense here in a few minutes as well. So with that's our panel. In terms of opening remarks, what I'd like to do is have each panel member give you a few opening remarks, and then we're going to get into some questions and answers. And hopefully we'll have time to get some questions from the audience as well. So if you recall General Smith, he introduced me as the former CEO of the Defense Commissary Agency, and in that role, I was actually the largest customer of TRANSCOM, peacetime customer, in getting products. We had 235 stores, grocery stores essentially, around the world, but many in the Indo-Pacific realm, and getting fresh, frozen, dry, and refrigerated goods to military families in Korea, Japan, Guam, and Hawaii was quite the challenge. in that time frame when I was CEO. So because of that experience and some of the fun I had in trying to get products to our families, General Brown asked me if I wouldn't mind running this panel, because I can tell you there were lots of challenges. Any of you all parents? Do we have any parents in the house? I thought we might. But for one example, shipping across the Pacific. You know, as a U.S. Department of Defense agency, we needed to use U.S. flag ships to move our goods. And often I just found myself in a situation where DECA, my agency, could not move a lot of these commercial goods across the Pacific on U.S. flag ships. And when baby needs diapers or baby formula, we had to do whatever it took to get those products into those stores in, say, the far reaches of Korea, as one example. And literally had to make decisions to fly goods like that across the Pacific at around $3 a pound in order to get those goods to those families. Because it's one thing, you know, to maybe have to use a different brand of diaper, and God forbid, got in big trouble for buying the wrong diaper when I was a young parent. And but if you can imagine not being able to access any diapers, that's a real challenge. And that's a peacetime operation. You know, without the hype of contested logistics, I know General Rainey's not here, but Army Futures Command has really turned the volume up on contested logistics and how important that is, that we figure that out for future operations. And I think we'll get into that a little bit here. But that the challenges I was having just trying to get items shipped across the Pacific in a peacetime kind of mundane operation that was critical to military families was very telling to me that, you know, we've got some weaknesses we need to work on in our supply chains. And when I talk supply chains, the supply chain, you know, basically from raw materials to consumption, but it's also a series of flows in terms of information, which is why General McPhail and Ms. Murphy-Dougherty are here to talk about some of the information flow. It's about data. It's about being able to visualize your situation. And then it's about moving the goods both ways. And the information flow and the product flow is a two-way flow. And then finally, at least in the retail space, and often ultimately you need to address this, there's a financial flow that goes along with every supply chain. Where's the money going? What is it costing us? How do we get a product back, and how do we pay for that? But you've really got those three things going on at all times with any supply chain. So with that, I'll hand it over to General Helwig. Any opening remarks?
Thanks, Bill. No, I appreciate it. It's great to be here. It's great to be back again. It's great to share this panel with a number of colleagues. You know, if you were to do a staff meeting at Indo-PACOM about 2.5, 3 years ago, some of the same characters would be sitting around that table. And then just throughout our careers, we've all been connected multiple times and in multiple ways. Most recently, and probably most importantly in the Pacific, where I don't think any of us came here, you know, grew up here, but we all came here at the 06 colonel level, and then really began this journey and appreciation for, you know, what's described. And I think Admiral Paparo really hit the nail on the head earlier today of the tyranny of distance and the challenges associated with sustaining and supplying the joint force in this region, and how do we do that? Of course, in this role in TRANSCOM, you know, I've always been a consumer of TRANSCOM going throughout my career. I was never stationed there or a formal part of TRANSCOM, but I've certainly over the last year come to appreciate its key role in this region, and more importantly, its global reach. And really, how do we take the capabilities of TRANSCOM and its partnership, not just with the components in the joint force, but the other key and critical legs of it. And Admiral Paparo mentioned it, but the commercial industry partners that we have got to pull in into early and often into the fight as part of our response. And then also the challenges of activating a large reserve component that will be a critical part of that power projection into theater should we transition from competition to crisis and conflict. Hopefully not, but if we have to, those are key parts of what Transcom has got to do. And then I think fundamentally, and I've really over the years appreciated this focus, and that is how do we train the logistics warfighting function in competition to be ready and to connect all of those pieces that I just mentioned into a cohesive whole so that when we're called upon, we can both deter, because logistics has got a deterrent effect in and of itself, in the posturing and prepositioning and setting conditions. We live our life out loud, so it's fairly obvious, and we can transmit that. And so building that capacity and capability, reinforcing it, ensuring that it's ready and available and rehearsed ahead of its required needs, and then balancing that against the Homeland Defense requirement and others are all key parts of the Transcom mission. And so great discussion. Looking forward to the questions and comments today. With that, I'll hand it over to Gavin.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, sir. So first, thanks to AUSA. It's General Brown. It's always great to see you, sir. Sergeant Major of the Army, former Dan Daly, may have seen me flounder a time or two at a CSS rehearsal at the National Training Center, where he was one of my brigade's battalion sergeant majors. He went easy on me back then. He told me to go easy on me this morning. So, Sergeant Major, I appreciate that. Thank you. It is a little bit nerve-wracking when you're following the former, 8th TSC commander up here on the stage. Sure, we didn't drive it into the guardrail yet. We're working on it. But more importantly, I really wish the former J4 at Indo-PACOM would have set some plans and policies in place that would have made my life easier when I took over from the 8th TSC. That sounded really good until I realized that was me. And so what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, and I look forward to discussing, is really the tenets that my boss, General Clark, has given me to, number one, to organize the sustainment formations. And it's not just about organizing it from a U.S. Army lens, though that is all compos, Compo 1, 2, and 3. There's also with our allies and partners, of which there are a lot of them here today. And so how do you organize to best get after that tyranny distance to do, or, as Admiral Caparo said, cheap the tip fid? And so he gave some very directive things that he talked about, which is how do you pre-position? How do you think differently through contracting? How do you leverage allies and partners, and most importantly industry, to get after those things that would give us the competitive advantage? Like everything, it's one thing to have those things, but you got to generate options for the commander. So that's having ready formations, but then it's also how do you put contracting into a place that's more than just transactional for a short period of time, but you get over a long period of time, say a year or a multi-year contract that really enables logistics and sustainment across the region. We don't need any more bases, but we need a lot more places. Places that give us access, places that give us resources that we need for the combined joint force. That's one of my mantras as the operational commander for General Clark. That's my job to do. And then most importantly, you got to apply it. It's one thing to talk about it in Hawaii. It's another thing to go forward and do it with allies and partners with the combined joint force. And that's what we do as a Theater Sustainment Command across this theater every day. But we don't do it alone. We do it first with our joint partners. We prefer to do it with our multinational partners, and we get lots of opportunities to do that. But it is an entire network. It is a sinew. It is a network that creates the foundation that allows for operational maneuver and gives options to the commander. That's what logistics is supposed to do. I appreciate the warfighting functions and Admiral Paparo talking about that. Our job is to be the unsung heroes that set options up for the commander so that they can go be decisive at the place of our choosing. And so I look forward to talking to you about that. And Denise, over to you.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so I too was kind of wondering how I wound up on this panel. But I say that in jest because everything that General Hellwig and Gavin just talked about, and you as well, is the sheer amount of, or the sheer volume of data that is going to be required to get us to that speed and need and delivering those capabilities is all going to traverse the Army's network. And so that is what NETCOM is. We are a global command. We're globally aligned, regionally focused. We support 288 base post camp stations. But more importantly, we have 2 theater signal commands. One of those theater signal commands are here in Hawaii. It's the 311th, commanded by Brigadier General Ray Ferris. We also have a signal brigade here, the 516th, and then in Korea we have the 1st Signal Brigade. And so when you look at that, and then we have something called regional cyber centers, which is really what's making sure we're securing your information. There's 2 in the Pacific Theater, 1 in Korea and 1 here in Hawaii. So what do we do on a day-to-day basis? We operate, maintain, and secure the Army's network. But really, if I was to quantify that, we provide about, 936,000 and counting today Army 365 accounts. We're providing about 14,000 applications, also and counting, as well as I just got the latest update, we were providing about 13,000 mobile user support. Now we're up to about 19,000. And then we respond to about 1 million cyber incidents a day. And that takes place at the Global Cyber Center, but again, also around being in the region, the Korea Regional Cyber Center, as well as the Hawaii Regional Cyber Center. So, I think what's more important is where we're going, though. So where we're going is we're moving towards a unified network. And what is a unified network? To put it in context, at one point in time, we had 47 organizational networks, stovepipe networks. We're down to about 7 right now. So we're collapsing those networks. We are doing that based on zero trust security framework. And what does that mean? That means never trust, always verify. And in this world today where we're operating, that's very important. So it's as if you were showing your ID card from room to room to room. We're always verifying who you are and that you have the rights to access that data. So as we've always been a network command. We are now pivoting. We call this the year of the pivot. And we're pivoting to be in the central provider of services. So the Army has gone to a single service provider. And its services would be cybersecurity as well as those collaboration tools. And our 3-star headquarters, our cyber, is the single provider, and we do the services piece for the network. And so, as we move forward, and the reason why I bring this up, there's a lot of modernization efforts going on. I told you we're a global command, but almost everything has started here in the Pacific. And so we're moving towards a capability that allows us to have seamless movement. So think about your forces coming in, being able to seamlessly move, starting in the Pacific. Where we're moving towards a software-defined networking, a more agile network, I'll just put it that way, the Pacific. Modernizing our secure comms, the Pacific. So and I appreciate the Pacific because you've been very patient. And so when you're an early adopter, sometimes things may go down briefly, but they do go down. But we're able to learn from those and apply it to the entire Unified Network, the Army's network. So it's great to be here. Thanks again to AUSA. I know the others have thanked you for allowing me to come and present and talk about the network, my favorite thing, and all the services that we provide. And I look forward to answering any questions.
Great. Well, let me echo the thank you, Bill and General Clark and General Smith and AUSA for having me here. It's truly an honor to join these 3 panelists and yourself. As Bill mentioned, my name is Tara Murphy-Doherty. I am the CEO of a company called Gavini. We are a defense software company, and we are focused on building exquisite, great, best-in-class commercial software for, frankly, people in defense who have never had it before. People who work in acquisition, in sustainment, in logistics, primarily. And the way I sometimes sum that up is you can think about as the American tech sector ran toward the defense scene and entered, they've all wanted to build, which is a wonderful thing, the next big weapons system, the next autonomous platform. The not so great thing is as those systems are fielded, DoD manages them in spreadsheets and with PowerPoint decks and data calls and a VTC to your biggest prime. That has created a crisis, not just of operational availability, but of parts management and logistics and resupply. And in an era of data availability, artificial intelligence, and everything that we can do with software, we saw an opportunity to support a mission that my team and I are incredibly passionate about. So today, ARC is used for supply chain risk management across the U.S. federal government, but also really importantly in the Army by a range of organizations, whether you're conducting a resupply mission and want to do that in an AI-driven way, or whether you're restocking parts and collaborating with DLA. So I'm very excited to be here in particular, geographically here, because one of the things that on the industry side I've observed is the Army should be shouting from the rooftops and more frequently talking about its role in the Pacific. And so what a perfect venue to not just discuss the nature of the challenges that we face today as Americans, as the Army, but really to, I think, put this conversation in the context of what the Army is doing with transformation writ large. And so the final thing I would share is that as someone who has been working in national security for my entire career, I was working in the Pentagon in OSD, don't hold it against me, when then DIUX was started. Over the past 10, 20 years, the mantra in industry has been about why it's so hard to work with the Army. And I think today it is an exceptionally exciting time to be working with the Army. And it feels really good to be able to talk about what's being done and what action Army leadership is taking in order for that partnership with industry to be, one, more possible, two, across a more diverse set of companies in the United States, and three, just better and faster in order to drive to the outcomes that the Army actually needs. And we're excited to be a part of that, and I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion.
Great, great. Thank you all. Hey, if you would, bring up the map of the Indo-Pacific region. I just wanted to give us a little bit of context of just how large an area we are talking about, and then trying to connect the dots and build the sinews there, whether it's information, products, or financial flow of what has to happen as we continue to maintain our national security here. If you are an ASA member, you probably get a copy of this magazine, and this was one of my best editions, I thought, General Brown, and within it, General Clark, I loved your article, Prevailing in the Indo-Pacific. He talked about two major factors that we've got to get right. It's all about taking care of the people, which includes training the service members as we take care of their families, what I used to do in the commissaries, and as we take care of our partners. The second major factor was our partnerships. I think I heard this morning 33 countries are represented here, 14 Army Chiefs of Staff here, and I guarantee you we cannot be successful across that area without your help. And General Clark, I know you were rattling off Ballywood to Hollywood. I love that. I tried to do the math last night. Oh, that hill? Okay. 80 million plus square miles of distance of area that we're talking about here. And so the challenges of trying to move sustainment or move information or having a clear picture. I can tell you, in my time at the commissaries, I really had a tough time trying to visualize the status of my supply chain in Korea, for example, and then trying to get the right stuff there. When you're flying things at $3 a pound, it better be the right stuff. I think Tara will mention precision sustainment. But, when you're talking about these distances, you better be moving the right stuff at the right time, right? So with that, let's get into a few questions. And I'm going to start with General Helwig. Sir, many associate the term contested logistics with geographic regions and threat rings. How does U.S. Transcom talk about contested logistics?
Well, I think certainly, you can look at it geographically, but as a global functional provider, we've got responsibility for, every theater, and so that becomes really a question of prioritization across, and it doesn't always equal, as the priorities change, it becomes challenging to change that out. And the systems that we have right now are not as agile as we would like. And the great work that's being done in this venue is very helpful to get us to something that's more dynamic, certainly. But for us, contested logistics starts at the base camps and stations. Most, if not the great majority of our capability to move the force is CONUS-based and requires movement from base camps and stations to nodes to then ultimately get through that huge those huge distances that have been mentioned already, right? So how do we make sure that we're ready, that we're able to generate that that's required at the time of need? And just about every logistics operation that I've been a part of has been contested in one way or the other. National Training Center, JRTC, you name it. I always breathed a sigh of relief, honestly, when the last vehicle drove off out of the RUFMA into the box. And so similarly with Transcom, we've got to get all of that work done in that environment where you've got everything from the challenges associated with ensuring our access spacing and overflight is straight, the customs clearances issues that inevitably come up as we work through and by with and through our partners. And then most importantly, ensuring that the joint force has got a clear-eyed picture and we're able to make informed decisions rapidly enough to meet the demands of the combatant command and the combatant commander. And so often we've seen this as kind of a two-stage process where Transcom delivers to an intermediate point and then the joint force or the Indo-PACOM led by TSC in a lot of cases takes over. But what I think we're seeing in this contested environment is we've really got to make it less about that transition and more about how do we do one unified flow, one giant muscle movement using these sinews to where we manage it in a way that optimizes that transportation, because it's not going to be, every pallet position has got to count. And every piece of equipment that we misship or inadvertently put in the wrong place, particularly in some of the areas that we operate, that Indo-PACOM operates out of, creates a lot of additional friction that is not going to be helpful, and also pulls that valuable space. To your point on the $3 a pound, in this case, it's capability that might be very essential to an operation and puts it out of position. And so we've got to make sure that connection is well integrated, well rehearsed, and that connection isn't just a mill-to-mill connection. It's a mill to civilian, commercial industry, and with our partners in the region. So we've got to make sure all of that is worked into the flow of the sustainment in a way that we have not rehearsed or done in the past. So we've just got to keep working that together to ensure that when we do flow, it's at the speed and scale that's desired.
Thanks, sir. Thanks. General Gardner, both Admiral Papero and General Clark talk about a prevailing strategy for the Indo-PACOM theater, but how does Army sustainment fit into that plan? What must the ATSC do to ensure U.S. and its partners are able to prevail in the Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, that's like such an easy question, right? And I wish I had like the easy answer for it. But what I will tell you is what we haven't been doing is sitting on our hands. And it started with the gentleman to my left, and really with a vision that was set out years ago from an Army leadership, but also a joint leadership, to get after what Admiral Paparo talked about, which is setting the theater now. And that's done through a multitude of ways. So, number one, pre-positioning the right stocks and equipment forward. So there's been a lot of decisions lately from Army policymakers, at least I'll talk about the Army, to really get the right equipment and stocks, munitions, set forward in this theater west of the international date line that really get after that what Admiral Paparo talked about. It's one thing to have capability, but you also got to show it. You got to have some ability to deter. Well, you only deter if you're forward in this theater. So you can do that a couple of ways. From a sustainment portfolio, one is pre-positioning equipment and stocks. Now, it's got to be at the right place. You got to know what's there, and that'll be some of the conversation we'll have on the right side of this panel up here about, hey, seeing yourself, knowing what's available, and knowing how you get access to it rapidly in order to maneuver it appropriately to support maneuver formations. So that's one way. Number two is that great chart of the tyranny of distance. Well, how do you defeat the tyranny of distance? Well, you better have a logistics network that is built upon a mesh system so that if one node goes down, say a logistic hub goes down, the system is agile enough to respond and in real time transition formations, supplies, people, and move them around the network. So from Hollywood to Bollywood, the Arctic to the Antarctic, we can maneuver sustainment formations and, more importantly, not waste the assets that Transcom has. So you're going to have to do that. Our ability to leverage AI today is terrible. Okay, my staff, and I see them some in the audience right now, love Excel. It's like their favorite tool, all right? But we ask them to do all kinds of things, all those complicated maneuvers of seeing ourselves from a posture of what the supplies are, what is the force formation that's going to come in, not just from a sustainment portfolio, but from all the warfighting functions. And just because we want to make it a little bit harder, it is a joint combined operation out here. So how do you see what the other services are doing? All 5 of them, by the way, to include Space Force. And then most importantly, what our allies and partners are doing? How do you have access to what they're willing to share, but you got to be able to anticipate? Right now, that goes a lot off of old tables, old ways of thinking, and really relies on huge piles of stuff maybe in one particular location. If it can be seen, it can be targeted. We've learned that out of the European theater. We've learned that out of the Middle East. So how do you have a diverse network? How do you push things and make it survivable? So we got to work on that. And then the last thing is, if you asked an American soldier, could you have more gas? The answer is going to be, oh, hell yeah, I want more gas. I just don't want to pay Hawaii prices. All right, so we have to do a bit of demand reduction. So that's on all forms of energy. How do you do a little bit smarter from a power source, smart grids, leverage wind and solar that is very prevalent out here, reduce some of the demand reduction so that we're not always moving around liquid logistics, fuel, and then also water. If you haven't noticed, it's really hot out here, even though there's a nice trade wind right now. If you go forward to most of the places we're talking about, Philippines, Indonesia, look, it's hot. You drink a lot of water. Moving water on the modern battlefield is a pain in the butt. All right, it's one of the hardest things we do. So how do you generate and produce water forward? How do you reduce that logistics burden that already is challenging our supply chain from a distribution perspective? How do you do production forward? That's just some of the things we have to do to prevail, and we're getting after that. Look forward to highlighting some more of that.
Awesome. Great points, Gavin. General McPhail, let's talk about the network for a moment. Critical enabler, obviously, for any operation. But why is the unified network modernization a critical enabler for the Pacific theater?
Yeah, so my boss in a couple of days will talk about setting the theater. Gavin mentioned setting the theater. And so what the unified network does and all the modernization we're doing is setting the theater. And so I talked a little bit about seamless movement. There is a capability that's being rolled out. The Pacific is, I think, 97% complete on this capability, but it's referred to as the Army Unified Directory Service. And why do you care about that? It's odds for short because we're trying to see how many words we can make up with our acronyms. So we'll go with odds. And so why is it important? One, for your S6s out there who every time they deployed to Iraq or or a regionally aligned force that was rotating in and out, they had to bring their computers in and they had to re-image them. And so that meant they got there many weeks ahead of time. They oftentimes had customers, to include commanders, that were not happy that they did not have a computer. This does away with that. You will no longer have to image a computer. We're working on the unclassified side now, classified's next. But it's also a cloud environment. So it's moving all these capabilities into the cloud to include applications. And so you'll have an app store, so to speak. It's called Company Portal, where you'll see where all your applications are. And so whatever you're using, whatever unique application you're using in Fort Carson, you will be able to use that same capability if you go to Fort Lewis, if you come to Hawaii, Europe, etc. It also provides us significant visibility of the devices on our network, visibility that we've never had before. So much so that I was talking to one of my team members who is the capability manager for odds. Everybody's going to walk away going, odds. And he was like, okay, ma'am, I see that you're in Honolulu right now. I'm like, I told you I was working with this. But, you know, he knows exactly where I'm at, exactly where that device is. And then we have what we're doing with the global, it's called the Global Unified Network, AGUN. So it's Army Global Unified Network. So there's another word for you, AGUN. And so what is that? That is moving towards a software-defined network. And why is that important? Gavin mentioned, you know, maneuverability. This allows us to maneuver the network, to maneuver the network infrastructure. So we're able to ensure that we have the right capacity for the information that's going to flow through key nodes. And so it's very agile. We're able to actually do it, manage it centrally, so we can manage it from our headquarters in Arizona. And so then we have the Global Secure Network, which is really a modernized secure network. So this is the best way I can describe this one. So you have, we call it, it's a technology, commercial solutions for classified. But today, you have to have a lockbox on where you plug your zipper cable into, right? And then you have to lock the hard drive up or the system up. That's going to go away. Now it is going to be a virtualized environment, and you're able to log in without having to have that lockbox. It's more secure. Your data is at rest, and also your data is in a virtual environment. And so when you turn off that system, you're done. And then the last is our Army Edge computing capability, AECCs. Haven't came up with a good word for that one yet. But that is, that's really where we're able to provide compute and store on the edge. So think about AECCs as on-prem, which means like cloud, here at Fort Shafter. And so we're able to position capabilities there that the warfighters can access at any time. So you'll have you have the commercial cloud that's going to provide that capability. You'll have the on-prem, and then next-gen C2 as they're moving out, the capabilities they will provide there. But at the end of the day, what this really does is removing the complexity from those fighting on at the edge, and really delivering resilient, flexible, and agile capabilities, applications, network, whatever you want to call it, for our warfighters. And so those are some of the capabilities we're bringing, and almost everything I just mentioned is already here in the Pacific. So to put it, to kind of put it in perspective, we're about 39% complete on odds, unclassified, while the Pacific is about 98% complete. So, great job on the 311th and team.
Great. Sounds like a lot of progress since I left the Army, but which is great news. When the network's down, my kids are totally useless. No,
What'd you say?
my kids are totally useless when the network's down.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Dad, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, great stuff. Ms. Murphy-Dowdy, let's talk precision sustainment for a moment. Your software has been Army tested to enable real-time visibility of the sustainment status in the context of an ongoing operation. As a logistician, that's pretty impressive to me to actually be able to visually see, where we are and what we need to do to adjust to the needs of the warfighter. But can you explain to the audience what that looks like today and how it can be used to improve future sustainment?
Absolutely, and it will pick up on what the General was just describing about the progress the Army is making on the edge as well. So at Project Convergence Capstone 5, just a couple of months ago this spring, as part of Army's Next Generation Command and Control effort, for which Gavini software is the sustainment application, we were able to demonstrate live through soldiers with their hands on the keyboard, not ours. Actual activity happening through the demonstration, things like rounds being fired from M1 tanks, and in seconds, way down the line, forget the workflows in, fires and maneuver, seamlessly you see the data update through 3 different applications that comprise one single common operating picture for the commander, and see automatic updates about stock on hand, availability of material, not just what was expended, but battle damage assessments that inform what do we do next. And that aspect of being able to use data in real time with the only way to do that is with artificial intelligence in order to actually get the commander and get soldiers, get the right folks to focus on making a decision. That's the goal of precision sustainment. And so everything that we are doing, and I think the Army is rightfully asking for, it is the Army right now, although would love to talk about this in Joint Force context as well, is all about anticipating. How do we anticipate what will be needed? General Helwig, you mentioned this as well. What will be needed, because the reality in the Indo-Pacific region is that you have to be thinking about these things ahead of time or you will forever be late to need. And that's maybe the one thing I would go back on a question that you asked earlier about contested logistics. I think for the joint forces purposes, contested logistics begins with the industrial base. And we have to find a way to catalyze what is happening in the organic industrial base as well as what is happening in American industry in order to connect that to what we know we are going to need, either pre-positioned on the battlefield or in moments of need. And all of that is possible today from a data perspective, from a software perspective. The sinews are there, so to speak, in this context. Yeah. I would argue the military IT systems aren't quite there yet, but there's, like as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm optimistic about prospects for progress there as well.
Awesome. No, great stuff. I remember trying to get to a common operating picture in the old days, and we never really got there. And of course, we would demand data from the warfighter. You got to tell us when you shoot that round, and or how much fuel you've maneuvered, and they didn't have time to do that.
Well, so much progress has been made in the fires and maneuver kind of workflows. And in that warfighting context, we actually have seen progress, I'd say, over the past 10 years. I mean, I would love to hear others' views on this, but I can think of, and we've seen some level of modernization. And then, I talk to logistics officers who say, I'm tracking this in cardboard on the back of my truck. The gap between what we've done to support with AI and software and data, what we consider to be the more operational workflows versus what we have built and provided to sustainers and loggies, there's a huge gap. And I don't think that's okay anymore. And again, with respect to the importance of this conversation and this geography, logistics is lethality, period, full stop. And so I think there's a big opportunity to make leap ahead kind of progress here.
Yeah, great. Back to General Helwig. Sir, given the tyranny of distance and the likely threat within the Indo-PACOM theater, how is the line between inter-theater and intra-theater determined?
Yeah, I alluded to it before. Should there even be a line is one of the questions I think we really have to ask ourselves about in the Pacific. You can't really talk about the last tactical 1,000 miles and not really think that that's going to be a viable construct. So how do we better integrate, as has been discussed here, integrate those systems in that process and then really look to kind of erase that line through a variety of means. We know, there's no doubt in my mind that Transcom is going to end up doing direct delivery to a lot of places when you look at the requirements and what it takes to move it. And there's there's just some systems that are going to take C-17s. And so we've got to, rather than figure out what this point of transition is, we've just got to build a better integrated methodology that allows us to make these decisions early enough. And then you've got the other challenge in the Pacific that, many of us grew up with a Kuwait or a big place that we could stage from, right? And, you do the Easter egg hunt for your container that had the, 82nd sticker on it, or the 10th Mountain sticker that hopefully had your Humvee doors, and try to find it and, do the little Raiders of the Lost Ark thing and pull it out. But you could do that. And you could do it because you had the space, you had the material handling equipment, and you had the time. In this fight and in this theater, that will not be an option. And we can't dump a whole bunch of stuff in a place that can't absorb it and move it on because that will bring the Pacific to a halt just as not having it would bring it to the halt. If we jam a whole bunch of stuff into a port that can't take it, we've essentially done, shut down a port and created more dilemmas for the theater than taken them away. So we've got to figure that piece out. I think, tied to that, the contracting conversation that Gavin mentioned, looking at how we build capacity in the theater, not just with our traditional assets, but also with our contracting capability, looking creatively at that, I think is important. Doing those kind of battle handoffs in a system and a common operating picture that does allow us to make better informed decisions. And then from the strategic support base, being able to analyze that data and make mode decisions early so that, you've got the fast option in your gray tails, but arguably you could get a lot of the equipment and cheat the tip fid using other conveyances if you could make that decision earlier than we currently do. Right now we wait and then we have to fly. You get to a point where you have to use the $3 a pound option because the opportunity is passed because the anticipation and the ability to analyze that data and make those decisions earlier has passed. And so building that together is important. And then, understanding where we are going to operate in concurrently and acknowledging that intra-theater line is probably not something that is going to be as relevant certainly in some areas of the theater, if not a lot of the space.
Gotcha. No, great points. As a guy who worked in the Desert Storm era, where we had a huge mountain of goods ready to go, so we pre-positioned everything we would ever need, and the war battle lasted 100 hours, and we had a lot of stuff left over. And then we went to the just-in-time logistics realm where we were often just in time with the wrong stuff because we couldn't get our data right. And now we may be at a point where we can bring all this together with good data, good tools, AI, and actually achieve the goals of precision sustainment in time to influence the battle.
Yeah, we would love to have, General Clark or Gavin or somebody say, okay, now we need this, and us to be able to say, well, guess it's like one day out on a ship about to be delivered, vice, oh crap, now we got to go find it and probably fly it to you.
Right. All right, General Gardner. Recently, Army Futures Command tested autonomous vessels here in Hawaii as part of Project Convergence 5. Regarding that effort, how do you see autonomous watercraft fitting into the Army watercraft strategy going forward? And actually, we had a question from the audience related to where are we on Army watercraft? The tens of thousands that we were using in World War II versus the couple hundred that we have in our inventories today.
Hey, so great question. So first and foremost, it's a watercraft question, not necessarily an Army question. And it really is, how do you organize and leverage all those things that are capable out here? So The Army doesn't need to go create, if you go over here to the Army of the Pacific Museum right over here across on DeRussy Park and see, the 15,000, vessels between the Navy and the Army that were executing amphibious landings. I don't think that's unrealistic. But what we do need is to look at how do you organize today for use of Army watercraft that we exist today to do operational maneuver and deliver those precision fires that Admiral Paparlo talked about, which, by the way, last week in Balakatan is exactly what we did. We moved to HIMARS over 1,000 miles using both, an Air Force C-130, an Army LCU, and then, oh, by the way, they also, drove themselves so that you gave unbelievable unpredictability to an adversary about where a HIMARS could then go deliver long-range precision fires. So Army watercraft, in this sense, for the gray hole, have a purpose. But where we really need to maximize that intra-theater sea lift capability, there's no reason why we shouldn't be leveraging commercial watercraft operational support vessels. So Joel Helwig to my left started this over 2 years ago about getting that capability out here in the Pacific. So we have that today. And that's a good interim step. But long term, why would we not use autonomous watercraft to deliver routine supplies across vast distances? And I like to use the term create Liberty ships of the future. Except this time we don't need to put USS Mariners and Merchant Marine to the bottom of the ocean. We could just put an autonomous drone vessel down. But if I create 1,000 of these going on their own separate waypoints, moving across the Pacific, then I've created a targeting dilemma for adversaries. Give them a problem set. I'm tired about us talking about our problems. Let's give somebody else a problem. You go find 1,000 ships out in the middle of the Pacific. It's very easily said. It's really friggin' hard to do. So let's go do that. And that capability exists today. It was proved out here in Hawaii. We have industry partners that have this capability today. It is absolutely driven by AI and the technology that the people to my right allow us to do to move it across, both the terrestrial and the non-terrestrial means to command and control that. And now we just need to get after scaling it. And not only from what we need to do from a U.S., but we also need to share this with our partner and allies, and so that we get the economies of scale that when you get after autonomous about what it could create for us, not only from a military sense, but from a commercial sense. Because at the end of the day, if the commercial industry starts going this route, which, by the way, if you go to the Gulf of Mexico, you'll see autonomous resupply vessels that the oil industry has been using for years. Why aren't we leveraging that technology, that path that has already been figured out moving forward? And that's exactly what we are going to do. I can tell you the Army senior leadership sees it that way as well. How do you move amongst multiple lines? You have a manned fleet, you have an unmanned fleet, and you have a commercial fleet, all of which combined together create opportunity and deliver the needs for the joint force.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. General McPhail, I got a question, but I'm going to tie in a little bit of some of the audience questions in with it. What else is NETCOM doing to support the Pacific Theater specifically? And what I'm getting a lot of chatter from the audience on is how do partners, industry, and really the joint force all get connected to the network and in a typical operation? Is there any insights on how that should work moving forward?
Seamlessly.
Awesome.
You
heard it here.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's a good question. I will break it up. I'm going to talk about, when we talk about allies and partners, and what NETCOM does.
Perfect.
So first of all, NETCOM, we provide the transport, so we provide the roads on the network to move the data in this mission partner environment. When it comes to actually providing a mission partner environment, the only environment, or the only partners we're supporting right now is in Korea. So 1st Signal Brigade provides Centrix K to USFKs, and we also secure. So we have one theater that provides Centrix K to, it works with the Korean's equivalent, which is a JKIX, and then we provide the transport, and then we secure. So we're providing the security of all of those environments, MPE, et cetera, for the Army. As far as bringing in the joint community, I think we are getting better every day when we look at the DODN perspective. we still have challenges with our systems. You know, we were talking about the IT systems, the mission command systems out there, being able to communicate jointly. But I think we're going to be able to move towards a solution as the entire Department of Defense is going towards this zero trust security framework. And why that's really important is because that's all about securing the data. So I talked about earlier, it's about, you know, you never trust, always verify, but that being able to decouple the data from that and only focusing on securing the data, and we call it attribute-based access controls. There's all sorts of stuff you can Google, and I think there's a ZT for Dummies out there that you can pull up. I've used it, so it's all good. But it's about attribute-based access controls, and that's how we're going to be able to really move to joint interoperability as well as working with our mission partners. Today, we do really good with communicating, meaning we're able to send emails, we're able to make a phone call, joint and with our mission partners. But to really achieve interoperability and the ability to fight alongside our partners, we've got to be able to share that data. And that's the challenge that we struggle with now. But I do think as we're moving towards this zero trust environment and standardizing how we share that data, how we start labeling that data, we're going to get better and better at not only communicating and sharing data with our coalition partners, but also our joint community. I don't know if you had a third part to that question. Was that it?
That was it. Yeah. I mean, unless you've got any other aspects of next.
Yeah, and so when we look at what we're doing here in theater, I talked a lot about the modernization, but there's direct support we're providing today. First Signal Brigade, I mentioned earlier what they're doing with Centrix K and providing that to USFK and 8th Army, but they're also tying the modernization back in. They're actually implementing the first software-defined network. So they had probably the oldest infrastructure. It was really new about 20 years ago, but now they got the newest 20 years ago, and they're about to get the newest again with this Army Transport Edge initiative. And then we have what 311 they do every day with the direct support. We have something called regional hub nodes, which are satellite gateways. And so these satellite gateways, we have about 5 of them globally, but we have one here in the Pacific in Guam. And 311 is looking at how do we pull in the latest technology to PLEO while maintaining a diverse portfolio, so not bounding ourselves to one technology. And so when we look at working with our industry partners, what I would ask the industry partners to do is help us be able to integrate some of our, I'll say, legacy infrastructure and capabilities with the emerging technologies, because much of that legacy equipment is still very good. That technology is still very good. It's just how do we use it differently? And that's where you really need industry's help, is helping us bring them both together so we have a diverse portfolio, and how do we use them differently?
Gotcha. Great. Ms. Murphy-Doughty, and along the same lines of what the audience asked, but regarding integration with Army command and control platforms, you've worked with Army on next generation command and control with an open architecture approach. So, kind of from an industry perspective, in a theater as vast and complex as the Indo-Pacific, how does industry think about integrating across Army systems to enhance operational decision-making and readiness? And then again, what is the play of allies, partners, and maybe even suppliers on the industry side?
Sure. Well, I might pick up on the last thing that General McPhail said, which has to do with the ability to share data and how important that is between U.S. forces and our partner and allied forces. Couldn't agree more, but wouldn't it be great if we could just share data among U.S. forces? Yes. which is part of what we're helping with, and so progress is being made there. But often what we see is there's such a distinction between what services and DoD have thought of as business systems and what they've thought of as operational systems. And so we've integrated our software on the operational side with Maven Smart Systems and able to deploy to support, like we talked about, warfighter exercises, and we're expanding that and bringing so much of the sustainment insight and data to the battlefield, that's what's really unique. And then once you're able to actually move that data and you've got the compute to be able to use AI and ML algorithms to calculate your resupply plans automatically and optimize the actual packaging and optimize your transport routes and look at alternatives, all of which can be done ahead of time as well. Right. But when you can do that all in one place, well, then those distinctions go away and it becomes really powerful. But so much of the data that you need to take all of those factors into consideration is part of other systems, or as I mentioned before, have been thought about, well, that's an industrial base issue. That's an acquisition question. The PEOs do that. Call Army Materiel Command for that one. And the reality is we have to bring all of these things together in order to make them work. So this is part of where the open architecture comes in. The legacy systems aren't just siloed because people think that's the right way to do it or because we can't think of better ideas. No, they're siloed because that's the way they were built. And the open architecture system or idea or concept works whether you're talking about weapons systems or you're talking about IT. I think about it, I'm the daughter of a home builder, so I think about it like building a house. If you commission a custom residential build, imagine leasing your blueprints from the contractor. Wouldn't happen, right? You'd never be able to make renovations. Who knows, you buy a house, you get the blueprints with you. Now, you might lease all sorts of other things, or you might just build in components that you plan on replacing. But you have to own the parts that everything plugs into. And I think that is perhaps a tortured metaphor, but a workable metaphor for open systems architecture. This is exactly what we're doing in next generation command and control, where all of the APIs that exist that allow our software applications and our data infrastructure to talk to each other, those are all owned by DoD. That's government IP now. But there's no IP claim over the applications that we're building that support the workflows on top. That's because they're changing all the time. And so the great way this aligns incentives is it puts what, in this case, the Army needs in the hands of the Army, which is the ability to move pieces in and out of a flexible, dynamic system. And it incentivizes great commercial partners to come participate because they aren't stuck just building to one set of requirements that hasn't changed since 5-10 years ago that they were designed. So there's a lot of different ideas all wrapped into a broad question, but I think it's why good industry partners are excited about open architecture, and I think it's also why it's a really good step forward for DoD.
Awesome. You were actually bringing back some distant memories of OIF and hanging out with movement control teams, which these guys commanded at one time in their careers, but trying to put together convoys, 40 or 50 convoys a night, where you have joint consumers, Army consumers, international consumers, host nation, and you're trying to get all that stuff delivered just in time to all of these customers, and many of them had no access to your IT. So just trying to gather up the requirements and then turn it into a met demand was just, I was amazed how these teams and how that operation actually got conducted. And I know y'all were on the ground for a year. I'm only on the ground for a few weeks, but it's just unbelievable. And how far I think we've come and could be. And that was in an environment that was pretty static in terms of daily consumption rates and things like that, to our map of trying to move over these distances in a dynamic environment. So it's unbelievable.
I'll give you a small but I think powerful example of what we're seeing right now. So one of the features in our software application is called Parts Replicator. And it's just an AI recommendation engine. Just like Netflix tells you what to watch next, our AI engine tells you if you use this part a lot, here are 5 or 10 other that, based on technical specifications or has to be certified for a nuclear system or it needs to be hardened to a certain level, are interchangeable. And you can look at what does DLA have on hand, what do other services have?
Right.
We've talked about this before, General Hellwig. Maybe, you know, one base doesn't have it, but it just happens to be the part available at a base over here that visibility doesn't otherwise exist, but also NATO parts. And so this idea of we have to, and then actually the fourth to add is also what's available out there commercially.
Right.
That is the menu of options that has to be available to a soldier, to a war fighter, not just the straw hole that we've gotten used to looking at. So wasn't there for OIF, but hopefully will be if we ever, God forbid, end up in the next big fight.
Hopefully, for sure. Okay, I know we're getting close on time here, but I'm going to try to combine several audience questions, and it really comes back to you two. I would ask for a Huntley-Brinkley type answer, but it's all about, you mentioned places versus bases, but you need the places, and pre-positioning at a time when the funding of APS is taking hits, and so the Army pre-position stocks. And it's like, what are the realities of being able to execute a pre-positioning plan for possible contingencies in this current environment, and just any thoughts on how we're managing the tyranny of distance when the dependence on pre-positioned stocks might be at risk to some degree?
Sure. I mean, I'm just going to dive in, and I'm sure Joel Hill will pile on. So first, you know, we got to get it beyond service stovepipe lens, and it has to be a multi-compo lens. And so then how do you generate economies of scale? And then, you know, what I'd ask for industry is, you know, with competition breeds, you know, some goodness for the DoD. And so, you know, going back and asking those on up high on the mountain that we may have driven some traditional lines about who owns what slice of the globe from a contracting perspective to provide certain services, that, you know, we need to get it back after open competition. And the goodness is that I think, you know, DoD leadership is there with us. So, you know, as we look for opportunities to get after combined joint requirements in this theater, it needs to be combined and open to both traditional partners and non-traditional partners to break, you know, the status quo and get after some good capabilities moving forward. And I think that's the way we need to do this and approach it. And that's my methodology.
Yeah, right. And I think to riff off of this as well, and alluded to a conversation we had, you know, I've been on Tinian, right? A small island with Air Force operating, Navy operating, and Army operating. And I remember going to the airfield and talking to the airfield control group, and them complaining about the fact that, hey, we need a forklift to be able to download our aircraft. And I just come from the Navy side with the Seabees that had like 4 forklifts sitting there. And I'm like, have you driven down the road and just asked? And I didn't mean it pejorative, but, you know, it doesn't occur sometimes to the Joint Force that we can actually work. So, you know, we don't, in the pre-po decision, we don't want 4 forklifts sitting on Tinian. We need 1 or maybe 2 that the Joint Force can use. And, you know, from a transportation perspective, we don't want to deliver 4. From a maintenance perspective, we don't want to maintain 4. And there's probably 3 other places in the Pacific where forklifts will be required. So using the data, using that understanding, and then figuring out as a joint force how we're able to transact as well will be important. Because the other piece, pre-positioning is essential. We want to make sure that as much of this pre-positioned equipment is available to the joint force as possible, so that, you know, everybody understands what is there, what's not available, and the amount of service-specific equipment is minimized, and the amount of combined capability is maximized. Rapid runway repair, there's a lot of things in the theater that we can do, and if it's there and we can deliver it, and we can see it, and we know, and we can anticipate against it and drive it appropriately, we'll be in a much better place than, you know, building similar stovepipes in very small regional areas that just don't have the capacity to absorb them.
And even better is not to have a military forklift there, to have a commercial forklift there where, I'm not underwriting the maintenance and all the readiness of it. Somebody else is, and I just come in and I get it at the time and place of my choosing. But I've pre-done the contract so you don't gouge me at the time of need.
That was perfect. One of the questions did ask, was there a commercial opportunity there?
There is 100% commercial opportunities. I just asked for a fair and equitable look at the contract so that we don't get scuffed up at the time of need. It's my technical term.
And real quick, we have to rehearse that, right? That part of the warfighting, that's got to be rehearsed just like maneuvering all other forces. The commercial industry, if you don't put it into action, you don't learn those kind of things.
So we've got a couple of minutes. I think it's perfect timing for us to do a few closing points of what you want to leave the audience with. And if you don't mind, I'll start with you, Ms. Murphy-Dougherty.
Sure. I think what I would love the audience to take away is, in this Indo-PACOM context and given all the challenges we're facing, think about logistics beginning with the industrial base. You know, we always say it's from factory to fight, and if we can think about that as one system where visibility truly end-to-end like that is possible, adopt that today and it will make things feel smaller, even though they're not actually smaller or shorter, and certainly will make us go faster.
Great. Thank you. Joan McPhail?
Sure. If I was to leave one thing, I think it would be, as we are securing and operating and defending the network every day, our goal and our objective to support next-gen C2 advanced warfighting is how do we remove the complexity from the edge and let those that can only do what they can do, meaning if you're only there to push the talk button on radio, that's what you do. Pull the complexity to the edge or back up to in a global environment. But more importantly, it's about providing flexibility, agility, resilience, and the ability to respond quickly.
Awesome. Thanks. General Gardner?
Hey, look, so Americans never fight alone. We've always had partners, and we've also never fought alone without industry. And so for us to be successful, you need both of those. And so that partnership that we have done for our last 250 years as an Army retains its value today. And I would just ask, as we work together.
General Hayward?
So all over Facebook and LinkedIn, and I know in this audience, it's graduation season, and the academies, the ROTCs, all of those young men and women are graduating, within the next couple of weeks. Many are getting commissioned, and they're going to raise their right hand, and they're going to be a part of this Army very soon. We owe them the best logistics network in position, ready to go in the future. It can't be one that hasn't been rehearsed, built, and purpose-driven to support them when they go through their courses and get into the theater. And if we have to fight in this theater and move to conflict, we need to make sure that these sinews are strong. They certainly will be. They're going to do a phenomenal job for us, but we owe them setting the conditions for them to be successful.
Great. No, great points. And just in closing, back to the title, Sinews Across the Pacific. Just a couple of points. First of all, we talk these days very much about lethality and how much we need to be lethal in our fighting force. And lethality is awesome, but lethality really matters over time. So we've got to think through, how do we have a supply chain that maintains lethality over time? And, a weapon without ammunition is a club that's not really helpful to a soldier. And so we've got to be always thinking about that. The supply chain, as we described it today, is really a broad concept of information flow that's two-way, of product flow that's two-way, and financial flow that we didn't really get into and shouldn't in this context. And then finally, back, General Clark, to your article, it's about the people and taking care of those people that are going to do these great things to protect our peace and protect our freedoms. And then it's about partnerships, because we cannot do it alone, as the panel has addressed. So Thanks again, AUSA, for giving us the opportunity to present these thoughts. Thank you, panel members. Y'all were awesome.
A round of applause.
And I can't thank you enough.
Well, thanks, Bill. And as a recovering logistician, it warms my heart that the first panel at LANPAC was all about logistics. We're going to now take a break for lunch. Please join us for lunch in both the Hawaii Ballroom and the Honolulu Suite. Our lunch reception is sponsored by Govini. Thank you very much, Govini. As you explore the exhibit hall, don't forget to check out USERPAC's Commander's Corner. Please join us back here at 1400. 1400, you're not going to want to miss our afternoon keynote speaker, General Ron Clark. Thank you.